You talked about this concept of transaction costs. I think you laid out kind of like three different ones in the book. So can you discuss that a little bit and help us understand the importance of these different types of transaction costs and how that functions in the marketplace today?
As we've already touched on in our discussion here, the ability to exchange is critical to the material flourishing of the human race. And I know I keep emphasizing this point, but the reason for that is that there's only actually four possible ways for me to get what I want. And these four ways are logically exhaustive, actually. So I could rely on gifts from someone else. But if you think about that for a couple seconds, you realize that if everyone was doing this, if you kind of systematized that way of getting what you want, the world would be incredibly poor. It also pushes the question back a step. Where did the gift giver get what he's giving? So you could do that. You could steal from others. Ethical problems aside, if you universalize that means of getting what you want, you also live in a world that's nasty, brutish, and short. Quote from Thomas Hobbes. And also, like the first option, pushes the question back: where did the person who's being stolen from? Where did they get the good in question? Which really leaves us with two options. That's that make or buy decision again that we mentioned being kind of in Adam Smith's book. And so, okay, we have make or buy. Well, let's think about make for a second. There's a great book called The Toaster Project by a guy named Thomas Thwaites. And in this book, The Toaster Project, Thwaites chronicles his attempt to build a very simple toaster from scratch that is without cooperating with anyone else. Like he's not going to engage in the buying, he's not going to engage in exchange. He's just going to make. Okay. And it takes him about 9 months. He does cheat a little bit along the way. And after this 9 months of like full time work, okay, on this toaster, I don't remember where he got the time and the money to do this, but he plugs the toaster in, and 5 seconds later, it shorts out. There's a small fire, and it like melts down. Okay, so
Oh,
after 9 months of work, like that was the consequence, and that is a little vignette of what our lives would be if we systematized or universalized this third means of getting what we want, which is just making everything that I want to consume. Which
yep.
brings us to this fourth option of specialization, doing what I'm relatively the best at, producing more than I want to consume of whatever it is. In my case, it's economics lectures. Okay. And then trading that away for money and then using that money to buy those things that I want. And so that's why I say that the ability to exchange it's not optional if you want to observe mass flourishing, to use the economist Ed Phelps term, or for the material conditions of the human race. And so that's why economists are so obsessed with specialization and exchange and the conditions which give rise to it, the conditions which suppress it and force us into one of those other three means of modes of getting what we want. At the same time, going back to our no free lunch point, it's not like that particular mode of organizing human affairs is somehow a free lunch either, because when we exchange, we actually introduce a new type of cost that is in addition to production costs. I'd have production costs if I was perfectly self-sufficient.
Hmm.
And we also have production costs under specialization and exchange. But there's a new type of cost with specialization and exchange. And this new type of cost is called a transaction cost. Now, of course, we still want to engage in more specialization and exchange because the benefits outweigh the costs. But that's not to deny that there are these costs. And so these transaction costs, in brief, what they do is, or the way to think about it is just that in the act of exchange, that act eats up some of our valuable resources. And so the higher the transaction costs are in any situation, the less specialization there will be, and therefore the less will produce of these valuable goods and services, and therefore society will be poorer than if those transaction costs had been lower.